The stars looked different from the bridge of the U.S. Defender. Captain John Hayes stood with his hands clasped behind his back, watching as the massive ship slowed from its faster-than-light journey. This was the moment humanity had worked toward for decades. First contact with confirmed intelligent life beyond Earth. "Status report," Hayes said, his voice calm despite the weight of history pressing down on his shoulders. "All systems normal, Captain. We're approaching the coordinates provided in the transmission," replied Lieutenant Kate Miller from her station. As the ship's xenobiologist, she had spent the journey studying everything they knew about the Galactic Confederation, which wasn't much. The message had arrived 3 years ago. A simple greeting, mathematical proofs to demonstrate intelligence, and an invitation to meet at these exact coordinates. Earth had responded by accelerating its fledgling space program and building the Defender, humanity's first true interstellar vessel. "Visual contact in 30 seconds, announced the communications officer, Gray Powell. Hayes nodded. "Put it on the main screen." The view changed, and collective gasps filled the bridge. Ahead floated what could only be described as a space city. Massive structures of gleaming metal and strange crystalline materials formed a sprawling station, at least 50 times larger than the Defender. Around it, ships of various designs moved in organized patterns. "My God," whispered Miller. "There must be dozens of different ship designs." The message wasn't exaggerating. It really is a confederation of species. Hayes tapped his console. "All hands, this is the captain. We have made visual contact with the Galactic Confederation. Remain at your stations and remember your training. We represent all of humanity today." The communication system crackled to life with a voice speaking perfect English. "This Defender of Earth, this is Nexus Station Control. You are cleared for approach to Docking Bay 17. Follow the guide lights. Welcome to the Galactic Confederation." As the Defender moved toward the station, 17 different alien vessels formed an honor guard around them. Each ship was unique, representing a different member species of the Confederation. "They're scanning us," reported Security Chief Alan Parker. "Multiple bands, nothing seems aggressive." Hayes nodded. "Let them look. We have nothing to hide." Miller moved to stand beside Hayes, her tablet displaying rapidly changing data. "Captain, I'm noticing something odd. 16 of the escort vessels are emitting what appear to be standard greeting protocols. But that dark vessel at our 4 o'clock position is conducting deep scans of our crew quarters and psychological profile databases." Hayes frowned. "Identify." "Based on the Confederation data packet, that's a Vrax Empire vessel," Miller said. "They're described as one of the more militant members of the Confederation." As the Defender approached its docking position, the Vrax ship broke formation, moving uncomfortably close. Its design was angular and predatory, covered in what appeared to be weapons arrays. "They're hailing us directly," Powell said, surprise evident in his voice. "On screen," Hayes ordered. The image of an alien appeared. It had gray-green skin stretched over a face that reminded Hayes of Earth's ancient reptiles, but with 4 yellow eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Behind it stood several similar beings at control stations. "Humans," the alien said, its mouth moving oddly around the English words. "I am Supreme Commander Zortak of the Vrax Empire. Your species is unexpected. We will be watching your integration into galactic society with great interest." The transmission cut off before Hayes could respond. Miller looked troubled. "Captain, did you notice? They weren't interested in our weapons or technology. All their scans focused on our entertainment databases, psychological profiles, and social behavior patterns." Hayes turned to her. "What would they want with that?" "I don't know," Miller admitted. "But in my experience, when someone studies how you think rather than what you have, they're not planning to be your friend." The Defender slid into its assigned dock with a gentle shudder. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, unaware that they carried something no other species possessed, something that would soon become their greatest weapon. 2 weeks after their arrival, Ambassador Frank Collins stood in the Grand Hall of the Confederation Council. The circular room stretched hundreds of feet upward, with 17 massive seats arranged in a half-circle. Each seat held a representative from a different alien species. Humans did not yet have a seat, only a small platform in the center where Collins stood with Major Samantha Wright at his side. "The Confederation welcomes Earth's representatives," said the council leader, a tall being with blue skin and 6 arms. "We invite you to state your case for diplomatic relations." Collins stepped forward. At 62, he had spent his life in diplomatic service, but nothing had prepared him for this moment. "On behalf of Earth and all humanity, we are honored to be here. We come seeking friendship, knowledge, and peaceful cooperation." The council members murmured among themselves. Some nodded in apparent approval, while others remained still and watchful. "Fine words," came a harsh voice from the right side of the chamber. "But words are easy." It was Supreme Commander Zortak of the Vrax. Unlike the other representatives who wore ceremonial robes, Zortak was dressed in full military armor. "The humans speak of peace," Zortak continued, "yet their history is filled with war. Their entertainment glorifies violence. Their resources are spent on weapons." He leaned forward. "Tell us, Ambassador, why should we believe humans are ready for galactic society?" Collins felt sweat on his forehead, but maintained his composure. He had expected resistance, though not this direct challenge. Before he could answer, Major Wright stepped forward. "May I address the council on this matter?" she asked. The council leader nodded. "Proceed." Wright looked directly at Zortak. "The Supreme Commander is correct about our history. Humans have fought many wars. We have hurt each other and our planet. We have made terrible mistakes." She paused. "But is there any species here that has not? The difference is that we learn. Each generation of humans strives to be better than the last." She gestured toward the massive windows, showing the stars beyond. "We didn't come here to claim we're perfect. We came because we want to be better, and we believe that connecting with other intelligent life will help us achieve that." The chamber fell quiet. Even Zortak seemed momentarily without response. Finally, the council leader spoke. "Well said, Major. The path to wisdom begins with acknowledging one's flaws." As the session ended, Collins and Wright were led to their new embassy, a series of rooms adapted for human comfort within the massive station. Once alone, Wright's confident expression faded. "The Vrax representative wasn't just challenging us," she said, her voice low. "Did you notice how they watched our reactions? They're studying us." Collins nodded. "I noticed. What do you think they're looking for?" "Weaknesses," Wright replied, "but not physical ones. When we first arrived, their scans focused on our psychological profiles and cultural databases. They're trying to understand how we think." Outside their window, they could see the Vrax ship docked nearby. Unlike the other Confederation vessels that came and went, the Vrax maintained a constant presence. Why would they care so much about our psychology? Collins wondered. Wright's expression darkened. "In military strategy, you don't need to understand an enemy's technology if you can break their spirit. The Vrax are planning something." Over the next 4 months, human diplomats worked to build relationships with the other species. They exchanged knowledge, shared meals adapted for different biologies, and slowly gained trust, all except the Vrax, who maintained a cold distance while continuing their observations. Then one morning, Collins woke to flashing emergency lights. When he reached the embassy's command center, Wright was already there, her face grim as she watched a video feed. "What's happening?" Collins asked. Wright pointed to the screen showing 3 space stations burning. "The Vrax have attacked 3 Confederation outposts near Earth space, and they've sent us a message." The screen changed to show Zortak's face. "People of Earth," he said, "your trial period is over. The Vrax Empire has determined that humanity is unfit for galactic society. Surrender your planet, or face extinction." The emergency meeting room on Nexus Station was packed with representatives from Earth and the Confederation. Screens on the wall showed the Vrax ships moving toward human space. Ambassador Collins wiped sweat from his brow as he studied the grim faces around him. "How long do we have?" he asked. Major Wright pointed to the display. "At their current speed, the Vrax fleet will reach Earth in 3 weeks. They have over 50 warships, each more advanced than anything we possess." Captain Hayes, who had been called back from patrol duty, shook his head. "Earth's defenses can't stop that many ships. Not with their technology." The blue-skinned council leader stepped forward. "The Confederation condemns the Vrax actions, but our hands are tied. The founding protocols forbid direct military intervention unless the Vrax attack Confederation core worlds." "So Earth stands alone?" Collins asked. "Not entirely," said a small alien with 4 arms and silver skin. "We can provide humanitarian aid and limited defensive technology. But we cannot fight your war." Lieutenant Miller, who had been quietly analyzing data in the corner, suddenly spoke up. "This isn't the first time the Vrax have done this, is it?" The room fell silent. The council leader looked uncomfortable. "No," he admitted. "In the past 1,000 years, the Vrax have conquered 12 other species. Each time, they followed the same pattern. First, they study the target species. Then they isolate them politically. Finally, they launch an overwhelming attack. And the Confederation has never stopped them." Hayes asked, his voice sharp with anger. "The Vrax are careful," the council leader explained. "They only target non-member worlds or those with provisional status like Earth. They exploit our rules while technically following them." Wright slammed her hand on the table. "So they've gotten away with this 12 times before. What happened to those other species?" The 4-armed alien spoke softly. "Most were absorbed into the Vrax Empire as servant classes. Some fought to extinction. None successfully resisted." Miller moved to the main display and pulled up files. "I've been studying everything we have on the Vrax. In each previous conquest, they used psychological warfare before military engagement. They identify what each species fears most, then use that fear against them." "So what do humans fear most?" Collins asked. "Based on their scanning patterns of our cultural database," Miller said, "they think we fear death and pain, like most species. But that's not entirely true. Humans can endure tremendous suffering for causes we believe in." Hayes nodded. "History proves that. The more you try to break human spirit through fear, the stronger our resistance becomes." "It doesn't matter," said a reptilian Confederation member. "The Vrax technology is too advanced. Even with human determination, you cannot win this fight." "Maybe we don't need to outfight them," Miller said slowly. "Maybe we need to outthink them." All eyes turned to her. "What do you mean?" Hayes asked. Miller pointed to the scan data. "The Vrax have been studying our psychology, our entertainment, our humor." "Wait." Her eyes widened. "Captain, remember how confused the Vrax were by our entertainment database, specifically our comedy?" Hayes nodded. "They kept asking for clarification about why humans found certain things funny." "That's it," Miller exclaimed. "I've reviewed the biological profiles of all Confederation species. None of them, especially the Vrax, have developed humor as we understand it. Their neural pathways are extremely logical, hierarchical. They literally cannot process the cognitive dissonance that humor creates." Wright looked skeptical. "Are you suggesting we joke the Vrax to death?" "Not exactly," Miller replied. "But what if humor affects their minds the way a computer virus affects a system? Their brains evolved for absolute certainty and clear command structures. Humor requires holding contradictory ideas simultaneously. What if exposure to human humor creates a form of cognitive breakdown in Vrax neural networks?" Hayes stared at her, then slowly smiled. "Lieutenant, that might be the craziest defense strategy I've ever heard." "Crazy enough to work?" Collins asked. Hayes looked at the approaching Vrax fleet on the screen. "We're out of options. I say we try it." Wright nodded. So our secret weapon against the most dangerous empire in the galaxy is dad jokes and puns, Miller added with a small smile. Don't forget the puns. The next few days were a blur of activity. Captain Hayes had converted the U.S. Defender's main cargo bay into what the crew now called the joke lab. Scientists, engineers, and even a few comedians who had been part of the diplomatic team worked around the clock. Explain to me again how this is supposed to work, Ambassador Collins said as he entered the lab. The large room was filled with strange devices, screens displaying Vrak's brain scans, and walls covered in handwritten jokes and puns. Lieutenant Miller looked up from her workstation. The Vrak's brain evolved for strict hierarchy and logic. Their neural pathways can't process cognitive dissonance, the holding of two contradictory ideas the humor requires. She pointed to a brain scan. When we showed Vrak's observers samples of human comedy during cultural exchanges, their brains showed patterns similar to what we call a short circuit. They couldn't process why the unexpected punchline of a joke was supposed to be funny instead of just wrong. Major Wright picked up a small silver device. So we're building what we're calling psychological disruption arrays. They're basically joke-telling machines calibrated to Vrak's neurophysiology. Will they understand the jokes? Collins asked. That's the beauty of it, Hayes said, joining them. They don't need to understand them. The cognitive dissonance itself causes the disruption. In fact, the less they understand, the more effective it is. Wright nodded. It's like trying to divide by zero on a calculator. The calculator doesn't need to understand math to crash when given an impossible problem. At a nearby table, Greg Powell was testing different devices. The delivery method is tricky. We need to get the jokes directly into their command systems. What about their ships? Collins asked. Even if we disrupt their crews, their weapons are still more powerful than ours. Hayes smiled. That's where we got lucky. The Vraks are so confident in their superiority that their ship security is focused on physical attacks, not psychological ones, and their communication systems are constantly open to receive orders from their hierarchy. We've modified our communication arrays to broadcast directly into their command frequencies, Miller added. Once we start transmitting, every Vraks in their fleet will be exposed. Collins still looked doubtful. So our entire defense against extinction rests on knock-knock jokes. Not just any jokes, said a young engineer named Olivia Baker. We've been analyzing which types of humor cause the most neural disruption in Vrak's brains. Puns create moderate disruption because of the wordplay. Observational humor causes medium disruption because it forces new perspectives. And the most effective? Collins asked. Absurdist humor, Miller replied. The more random and illogical, the better. The kind that makes no sense even to us sometimes. The Vrak's brain simply can't process it. Hayes led them to a large display showing Earth and the approaching Vrak's fleet. We've deployed unmanned satellites throughout our solar system. Each is equipped with a psychological disruption array. When the Vrak's fleet enters the system, we'll activate them all simultaneously. And if it doesn't work? Collins asked quietly. Then we fight the old-fashioned way, Wright said grimly. But we'll lose. A alarm sounded, and Powell rushed to his console. Captain, long-range sensors show the Vrak's fleet has increased speed. They'll enter our solar system in 12 hours, not the 3 days we expected. Hayes's face hardened. They must have detected our preparations and decided to attack before we're ready. Are the arrays ready? Wright asked. Miller nodded. They're deployed, but we haven't finished calibrating them all. We're at maybe 60% effectiveness. It'll have to do, Hayes said. He turned to Collins. Ambassador, you should contact Earth. Tell them to prepare for the possibility that our defense fails. As Collins left, Hayes looked at the approaching fleet on the screen. The red dots representing Vrak's ships formed a perfect attack formation. You know, he said to no one in particular, I never thought humanity's fate would rest on our ability to tell jokes. Miller stood beside him, her face showing both fear and determination. The universe has a strange sense of humor, Captain. For the first time in days, Hayes laughed. Now that's ironic. The mood on the U.S. Defender was tense as the Vrax fleet entered the solar system. On the bridge, Captain Hayes watched the enemy ships appear on the main screen. 53 warships, each larger and more powerful than anything humans had built, moved in perfect formation toward Earth. "They're ignoring our hails," Greg Powell reported from his communication station. As expected, Hayes nodded. Status of the arrays. Lieutenant Miller checked her readings. "All satellites are online and ready. We can activate on your command." Hayes looked around at his crew. They all knew this might be humanity's last stand. If their plan failed, Earth would soon join the list of worlds conquered by the Vrax. "Open a channel to all Earth ships," Hayes ordered. When Powell nodded, Hayes spoke clearly. "This is Captain Hayes to all Earth vessels. Hold your positions. Do not engage the Vrax fleet until ordered. I repeat, do not engage." Major Wright, who had stayed aboard to coordinate the defense, raised an eyebrow. "The Vrax will see that as weakness." "Let them," Hayes replied. "We want them confident and focused on their attack plans." On the screen, the Vrax ships continued their advance, now passing the orbit of Mars. "They're charging weapons," Powell reported. Hayes took a deep breath. "Activate the arrays." Miller pressed a series of commands on her console. "Arrays active. Broadcasting now." For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. The Vrax fleet continued its approach. Then, one of the smaller ships suddenly veered off course. "It's working," Miller exclaimed. "Look at their communication patterns." The display showed chaos erupting across the Vrax fleet. Ships began breaking formation, some spinning in place, others firing weapons in random directions. Powell listened to his earpiece, his eyes widening. "Captain, we're picking up Vrax communications." "They're confused. Listen." He put it on the main speakers. A Vrax voice, usually so controlled and cold, sounded panicked. "What is happening?" "Command ship, respond. Why did the human cross the cosmic void? This makes no logical sense." Another voice cut in. "All units, disregard previous transmission. Why was 6 afraid of 7? Because 7 ate 9. No, that is not what I meant to say." Hayes couldn't believe what he was hearing. The arrays were broadcasting jokes directly into the Vrax communication systems, and their commanders were repeating them involuntarily while trying to give orders. "Their neural pathways are breaking down," Miller explained, watching the data flowing across her screen. "The humor is creating cascading confusion through their entire command structure." On the main screen, the Vrax fleet was now in complete disarray. Several ships collided with each other. Others fired at empty space. The largest ship, clearly the command vessel, was spinning slowly, all its weapons powered down. They're laughing," Powell said in amazement, listening to his earpiece. "Or at least, that's what it sounds like. I think their brains are trying to process humor and failing completely." Wright stared at the screen. "I never thought I'd see the day when 'why did the chicken cross the road' would be a weapon of mass disruption." A smaller Vrax ship suddenly exploded. Hayes winced. "What happened?" "They're firing on their own vessels," Powell reported. "I think some of them believe they've been infected with a human disease and are trying to contain it." "Alert all Earth ships," Hayes ordered. "Move in and establish a defensive perimeter. Capture any Vrax vessels that surrender, but do not fire unless fired upon." The human fleet, which had been waiting behind Earth's moon, moved forward. They were outnumbered and outgunned, but now faced a confused and disorganized enemy. "The Vrax flagship is hailing us," Powell said with surprise. Hayes nodded. On screen, Supreme Commander Zortak appeared, but he looked nothing like his former composed self. His 4 eyes blinked independently of each other, and his mouth twitched uncontrollably. "Hayes of Earth," he said, his voice unsteady. "What have you done to us? Make it stop. Why couldn't the bicycle stand up by itself?" He seemed to struggle against his own words. Because it was too tired. Zor, Tak shouted, then let out a sound between a scream and a laugh. The transmission cut off. Hayes looked at his crew. Prepare boarding parties. I think we just won. 2 days after the failed Vrax attack, Admiral Lisa Bennett stood on the bridge of Earth's largest warship, the Phoenix. Around her, a combined fleet of human and allied Confederation ships moved through the debris of the battle. Most of the Vrax fleet had surrendered after their command structure collapsed. Only a few ships had fought to the end, destroyed either by Earth's defenses or by friendly fire from confused Vrax commanders. Status report, Bennett ordered. Her second-in-command, Commander Alex Reyes, looked up from his console. We've secured 27 Vrax vessels, Admiral. Another 15 were destroyed in the battle. The remaining 11 retreated to Vrax space. And the Vrax crews. That's the strange part, Rice said. Most are in a state of mental shock. The medical team says they're experiencing something similar to a complete nervous breakdown. Lieutenant Miller, who had transferred to the Phoenix to study the Vrax prisoners, entered the bridge. Admiral, she said, I think you need to see this. Bennett followed Miller to the ship's medical bay. Inside, behind a clear barrier, sat a Vrax officer. Unlike the powerful, threatening figure Bennett had expected, this being rocked back and forth, occasionally muttering to itself. What's wrong with him? Bennett asked. Cognitive collapse, Miller explained. The joke arrays didn't just confuse them temporarily. They fundamentally broke something in the Vrax mind. Their brains evolved for absolute certainty and hierarchy. Humor creates uncertainty and breaks hierarchies by showing that anything can be absurd. It's like we accidentally discovered their one critical weakness. In another part of the ship, Captain Hayes and Major Wright met with several Confederation representatives who had arrived to witness the aftermath. Remarkable, said the blue-skinned council leader, watching video footage of the battle. In all our records, no species has ever defeated the Vrax in direct conflict. I wouldn't call this direct conflict, Wright said. More like asymmetric warfare. A reptilian Confederation member stepped forward. Whatever you call it, the results are unprecedented. The Vrax Empire has already withdrawn from the 3 outposts they attacked and requested peace talks. Hayes raised an eyebrow. They want peace, after threatening to destroy Earth. They're afraid, the council leader explained. For the first time in their history, they've encountered something they cannot understand or defend against. Your humor is more terrifying to them than any weapon. Meanwhile, on the Phoenix, Admiral Bennett had called an emergency meeting with Earth's military command. Large screens showed leaders from around the world alongside Confederation representatives. The immediate threat has passed, Bennett reported, but we should prepare for the possibility of another attack. A general from Earth spoke up. Can we weaponize this humor effect more permanently? Perhaps develop joke-based missiles or something. Several people laughed, then fell silent when they realized he was serious. Miller shook her head. The effect depends on surprise and confusion. The Vrax might develop defenses against it if given time. They might adapt. Like developing a sense of humor? Someone asked. Possibly, Miller replied, though that would require a fundamental change in their psychology. Later that evening, Hayes found Ambassador Collins staring out a viewport at the captured Vrax flagship. Thinking deep thoughts? Hayes asked. Collins smiled. Just wondering what happens next. We came to the stars hoping to find friends. Instead, we found enemies and defeated them with knock-knock jokes. Not what anyone expected, Hayes agreed. The Confederation is impressed, Collins said. They're fast-tracking our membership application. Apparently, any species that can defeat the Vrax deserves a seat at the table. And the Vrax? Collins's expression turned serious. That's the complicated part. Their empire is in chaos. Some factions want revenge. Others want to study us, to understand this power we have. A few are even requesting human teachers to help them understand humor. Teachers, Hayes repeated in surprise. Yes, Collins nodded. They see humor as a powerful technology they must master. They don't understand that it's not a weapon we built. It's part of who we are. Hayes looked at the stars beyond the viewport. So our greatest weapon turned out to be something we never thought of as a weapon at all. Ironic, isn't it? Collins said. Hayes laughed. Now you're getting it. 6 months after the Vrax attack, the Grand Hall of the Confederation Council looked very different. A new 18th seat had been added to the circle, the seat for Earth. Ambassador Collins sat there now, representing all of humanity in galactic politics. The Confederation recognizes the delegate from Earth, the Council leader announced. Collins stood. Thank you. Earth is honored to join this ancient body as a full member. We pledge to uphold the principles of peace and cooperation that bind our diverse species together. Most of the council members nodded in approval. Only the Vrax seat remained empty. Their empire had withdrawn from public Confederation affairs since their defeat. After the session, Captain Hayes, now promoted to Admiral, met Collins in the Earth Embassy. Lieutenant Miller and Major Wright were there too, along with several other humans who had played key roles in what was now called the Humor Defense. Congratulations, Ambassador, Hayes said, raising a glass. Full membership in less than a year. That must be some kind of record. Collins smiled. The Confederation moves quickly when properly motivated, and nothing motivates like fear of the Vrax, or fear of us, Wright added. I've heard some species are now wondering what other psychological weapons humans might possess. Miller, who had spent months studying the aftermath of the battle, shook her head. They don't understand. Humor isn't a weapon. It's how we cope with an unpredictable universe. It's one of our greatest strengths. A young aide entered the room. Ambassador, there's a Vrax diplomatic team requesting a meeting. Everyone fell silent. Despite peace negotiations, direct meetings with Vrax representatives had been rare since the battle. Send them in, Collins said. 3 Vrax entered the room. Unlike the military Vrax they had encountered before, these wore simple robes instead of armor. The one in front stepped forward. I am Senior Diplomat Zircon of the Vrax Diplomatic Corps, he said. His voice was steady, but his 4 eyes kept blinking in an irregular pattern. We come seeking understanding. Hayes watched them carefully. Understanding of what? Humor, Zircon replied. After the incident, our scientists have been studying it. We believe it may be crucial to our future relations with humans and perhaps other species. Miller looked fascinated. Have you made progress? It is painful, Zircon admitted. Our minds resist the cognitive patterns humor requires, but we are adapting. Slowly. To everyone's surprise, another Vrax stepped forward. This one seemed younger, with lighter skin. I have prepared an example, he said nervously. A joke, to demonstrate our commitment to mutual understanding. The room fell silent. The young Vrax cleared his throat. Why did the human put their bed in the banking facility? He paused awkwardly. Because they wanted to. Sleep where their money was being stored. No one knew quite how to respond. The joke was technically structured correctly, but something was off in the delivery and phrasing. After a moment of uncomfortable silence, Hayes smiled and then laughed. Not a mocking laugh, but a genuine one. That's pretty good, he said. You understood the concept of a pun. Sleep where their money was stored, instead of sleep where their money was kept, because humans also say they keep money in banks. The young Vrax's eyes widened. You found it. Humorous. Truly. I did. Hayes nodded. It needs a little work on the delivery, but the structure is solid. For the first time, the Vrax diplomat's mouth formed what might have been the beginning of a smile. Later, as the Vrax delegation left, Collins turned to Hayes. You didn't really think that joke was funny, did you? Hayes shrugged. Doesn't matter. What matters is that they're trying. 6 months ago, the Vrax wanted to conquer us. Now they're telling jokes. Bad jokes, but still. Miller nodded. This could be the beginning of a fundamental change in their society. Wright looked out the window at the stars. So the most powerful weapon humans brought to the galaxy wasn't our technology or our military strategy. It was our ability to laugh, Collins finished. And now, perhaps, our ability to teach others to laugh with us. As they watched the Vrax ship depart, Hayes smiled. The universe is full of surprises. And that, Miller said, is no joke.